Please. I would like to introduce you to Jacob here, who will be giving our presentation. So let's give him a warm welcome.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. As you said, my name is Jacob, one of the financial aid counselors here at UH Manoa. Sorry, this is right after lunch, so I'm going to try not to make you guys fall asleep with the financial aid stuff. But I guess, at this point in the year, I think you folks should probably have all of your financial aid stuff squared away. So I'm not going to really push you to do the FAFSA application. Although if you haven't, you still can. So there's still plenty of time. So I guess since this is the beginning of the school year, I kind of wanted to do things a little bit differently than the normal financial aid presentation to get people to do the FAFSA and to apply for financial aid. This is more of like where you're at right now. So this here up on the screen is our financial aid website for our office. So this is going to be a very helpful spot for you to go to anytime you have any kind of questions or issues with financial aid. So there's a couple of ways you folks can get into contact with our office because we do have a staff of counselors available to help you out. The easiest way, I would say, is probably this virtual front desk. This is to hook you up with a one-on-one Zoom session with one of our financial aid staff. So we do have a staff of counselors who is always on it and willing to talk to you face-to-face on Zoom. So that way you sign up by clicking on here. Connect me virtually, then it'll put you into a queue, a waiting list. And then once a counselor becomes available, then they'll send you the Zoom link and you'll be able to ask whatever questions you have for them. So this is available Monday through Friday, 9 to 3, Hawaii time. So you can go ahead and do that. And if not, you can always stop by our office in person. We're at the Queen Liliuokalani Center for Student Services, room 112, or QLC as it's usually called, 112. And if not, you can always email us at finaid@hawaii.edu. So this website, manoa.hawaii.edu/FAS. You're going to find a whole lot of good information here. So I mentioned that I wouldn't push too much on the FAFSA, but for those of you who haven't done the FAFSA yet, you can still do it. We have this link right here to get you to step-by-step instructions on how to apply for your financial aid. And the place you want to do that, to do the FAFSA, is going to be fafsa.gov, or not fafsa.gov, sorry, it's studentaid.gov. It used to be fafsa.gov. But you can go ahead and do the FAFSA application. Let's see. That's weird. Anyway, studentaid.gov. We bring that up for you. So for those of you who already did the FAFSA, this is going to look pretty familiar. So you have to go into your FAFSA application here. And I guess for those of you who already did your FAFSA for this school year, it's going to actually be opening up again in about a month and a half on October 1st for the following school year. So next school year is when you're going to do the FAFSA for in October. And I always like to encourage everyone to do that FAFSA as early as possible, as close to October 1st as you can, because we do have a lot of funding that is kind of limited. So we take a look at the FAFSA submission date to kind of figure out where you are on that list of eligibility to receive some of these funds. So it's always beneficial to you to get that FAFSA done as soon as possible. So in a month and a half, make sure you do your FAFSA for next school year, even though this school year is just starting now. So for attending UH Manoa, I'm sure you guys have started to see all of the charges hitting your student accounts. So what we have is something called the cost of attendance. And this is what the university uses to kind of determine the amount of financial need that students are, or financially that students are eligible for. We have it broken down into several different types of categories. For undergraduate students, it's also divided by like Hawaii residents, since they get charged a certain amount for tuition, versus non-residents. And then also if you're part of the Western Undergraduate Exchange Program, there's another different tuition charge. So these are all basically what you're going to be looking at. And then it's the main other difference in the cost of attendance is your housing situation. If you're going to be living at home with mom and dad, it's going to be a smaller housing budget than if you were to live on campus in one of our residence halls or off campus in like an apartment nearby. So these are all just your general costs of attendance, which isn't, again, not going to be what you actually have to pay, but just kind of, this gives our financial aid office an idea of how much funding you're going to be eligible for. So all this, as you can see, is just kind of coming from the financial aid website, so it's a really good resource that you can check out if you have any burning financial aid questions in the middle of the night. So a lot of the common questions right now is kind of regarding, I guess, financial aid status. I guess if you're still waiting for money to start coming through, then there might be some kind of outstanding requirement that might be holding it up. So we have step-by-step instructions on how to kind of check on your financial aid information. So I guess the first thing is you have to make sure that you've accepted your financial aid offer. So for those of you who haven't already, you can do it through your MyUH Services account. And we have this step-by-step tutorial here on our financial aid website on how to do that. So you can go ahead and get onto your MyUH Services account. And since I know it's not the easiest site to navigate, because there's a lot of clicking involved, we've got all of these like little helpful images, and we circled the important things. So you can definitely check that out if you haven't been able to accept your award offers yet. Okay, and there's a lot of other information, like if you had accepted some student loans or some parent loans, then there's also going to be some additional online paperwork that you're going to want to do. And then that's also going to be outlined here, and you're going to be able to do that on the studentaid.gov website. Same place you did the FAFSA application, you can do your loan paperwork on there. So like just by doing that FAFSA application, it kind of opens up several different aid opportunities for you. One of the best types of funding up there is grants. Grants are usually need-based financial aid given out by either an educational institution or a governmental institution. So since it's basically free money from these places if you have the financial need to be eligible for it. So the federal Pell Grant is the biggest, I guess, grant program that the feds have. It's tied directly to your expected family contribution number, or EFC, that number that the FAFSA calculates. So as long as you're within the eligible range and you're a first-time undergraduate student, so second bachelor's degrees, sorry, not eligible, or grad students either. But if you are a first-time undergraduate student and you fall into that eligible EFC range, then we should be able to get you some Pell Grant funding from the feds. If you're wondering what it is, I think it's about maybe an EFC of 6,200 or 6,300 and lower. And the lower that your EFC number is, the higher amount of grant funding you're able to get. But again, you have to do the FAFSA to even figure out if you're eligible for that. Also from the feds is another really smaller pot of grant funding called the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. We were able to award up to $2,000 a year if you're eligible for it, and if we have the available funding. So one of the main eligibility criteria is that you have to be eligible to receive the Pell Grant. So you have to hit all of those Pell Grant requirements, and then you may be eligible for this. But since it's such a limited pot of funding, this is when that FAFSA submission date, that early FAFSA submission date comes into play. So the earlier you get that FAFSA submitted, the higher you're on the list for everyone with that eligible EFC number. But honestly, I'd say, I think usually you need to have the lowest EFC of 0 to be eligible, and you have to get that FAFSA submitted early, just because that grant fund is so small. But if you fall into that category, then make sure you do that FAFSA early, and then we can see if we can get you some of this extra grant funding. The other big grant out there is the Manoa Opportunity Grant. That one is from the UH Manoa campus. It's based on financial need, so it is indirectly tied to the EFC. We have to take into consideration your cost of attendance as well, and other aid to determine if you're eligible. And if you aren't, we can award you up to $4,000 a year, so it's going to be half for spring, half for fall. And again, since this is also another limited pot of funding, you want to make sure you get that FAFSA submitted early. Because if two students have the same, I guess, financial need, one student does their FAFSA on October 1st, the other student does it in December, then the student in October 1st is going to be able to get it versus the guy in December. So make sure you get that FAFSA for next year done as soon as possible. The other type of aid that's available just by doing that FAFSA application are the federal loans. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of loans, but I know that it is important. It is necessary for most of us out there in order to fund our college educations. But this is kind of just the general information on the federal loans. We've got undergraduate loans. There's a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. If you've received both and you're not sure what to do with which one, the subsidized loan is the better of the two, because while you're in school, you're not going to be paying interest on that loan, whereas the unsubsidized loan, the interest is going to be accruing the whole time. Other than that, the interest rates and the loan fees, they're all pretty much identical for those two. So if you are offered both, go with that subsidized loan first. But if you don't see it, then you probably didn't have the financial need to be eligible for that one, because it is a need-based loan. So we'll have to take a look at your financial need situation before we're able to award that to you. Are there any grad students here? No? No? Okay, so I won't go over the grad student loans then. All right. Also out there, not really financial aid, but it's kind of related, work study. So if any of you are receiving federal work study, this is a pot of funding from the feds that we can award to students. And it's not going to pay to you directly from like a loan or a scholarship would. But this fund is used, I guess you would have to find like a federal work study job, usually a job on campus, and your employer would draw from these funds to pay 3/4 of your wages for whatever time you work. So it makes you a more attractive candidate to your employer, because they're going to be saving money from their department budget because they'll use the federal funds to help pay you. Also, when these funds show up on your taxes and you use those taxes for the next FAFSA, then those are going to be removed from the financial aid equation. So it's not going to count against you when you do that FAFSA for that year. So it's beneficial. It's definitely something to look into if you do have this award. If you haven't been awarded federal work study and you are interested, we do have a wait list going for it. And I can bring that up in a little bit. Okay, so also out there, scholarships. You don't necessarily have to do the FAFSA for it, but there is a lot of scholarship funding available out there. Unfortunately, the application periods usually run about a year ahead of the school year. So they open up generally October or November every year for most of them, or majority of them out there, and they close probably around the springtime, maybe like mid-February or March, at least for the big scholarships that we know of. But since it's August, mid-August right now, we're looking at the application cycle to be starting again in month and a half, 2 months or so. So keep that in mind. Right after you do your FAFSA application, that's when you want to start doing your scholarships too. The biggest scholarship, I guess, database that we have here on the Manoa campus is the STAR scholarship system. Well, that's not really much to look at here. But this is where all of the different colleges and departments across campus, the Manoa campus, house their scholarship applications. There's also a bunch from the University of Hawaii Foundation, a bunch of different applications they have for all of their scholarship funds that are for Manoa students. So if you folks haven't been able to apply for any for this current school year, just keep in mind that these are going to be opening up in a couple of months. STAR, I believe, opens up mid-October or so, or maybe November. And then you can go ahead and apply for those. Another scholarship source we have is the UH System Common Scholarship application. Now this one here is a bunch of University of Hawaii Foundation scholarships that are open to students from all 10 University of Hawaii campuses. So you want to go ahead and do this one as well. This application opens up, I believe, October 1st. At least that's what they did this past year. And they close about March 1st. So you're going to want to go ahead and check that one out as well. I think even though it's for all 10 campuses, there are about maybe 3 dozen or so scholarships in there that Manoa students are eligible for as well. So also listed on this scholarship page that we have a bunch of different local scholarship organizations that we've received funding from in the past that you can click through and check out. And there's also a bunch of different national websites. If you haven't checked a bunch of these out already, it's definitely worth checking, see what's out there. But I always like to encourage everyone to apply for as many scholarships as you can, because even like a $500 scholarship, that's still way better than a $500 loan, because you don't have to pay it back later, you don't have interest on it, way better. So I've been asked by some of my supervisors to make sure to mention some of the financial aid policies that come into play, since you're all new students, so kind of make you aware. A lot of funding out there, they have enrollment requirements for FAFSA. So a lot of times where our awards are based on full-time enrollment, so for undergraduates that's going to be 12 credits. So if you're enrolled in less than 12 credits, you're going to have to let our office know, because we might need to make some adjustments. So that was it for enrollment. And there's something called the Course Program of Study. This is basically a federal rule telling us that if you're going to be receiving aid, it can only be for courses that count towards your degree. So if your courses don't count towards your degree, we're only going to be able to give you aid for the courses that do. So you're going to want to work with your academic advisors, if you haven't already, to make sure you're only in classes that do count towards your degree. Otherwise, you'll miss out on some aid. And the other big one that they asked me to talk about is the Satisfactory Academic Progress Policy. So the feds say that we have to make sure you guys are maintaining good academic standing. So you have to maintain your GPA minimum. Usually it's a 2.0 for undergraduate students, but certain programs require a slightly higher GPA. Like if you're going to be in the College of Education, it's slightly higher. And I think, yeah, it's right here. College of Education and Kinesiology and Rehabilitation Sciences, for KRS. So they have slightly higher GPA requirements, so you're going to want to make sure you're maintaining that. And yeah, if you have other questions about the details, we got them all listed right here, but the GPA is the main one. So make sure you guys do well and don't withdraw from classes. Yeah. Right. So as I mentioned, our wait list for Federal Work Study Program, notice that link for forms on the right side of our financial aid page. And there we go, waiting list. It's kind of towards the bottom. So there's a waiting list for federal work study. There's also this waiting list for state higher education loan, or Shell. This loan is a loan that's only available to students who are a resident of the state of Hawaii. It is similar to the federal subsidized loan in that there's no interest accruing until after you graduate. Let me see if I have information here about it. Yeah. And it's a 5% interest rate, so it is a little bit better than those federal loans. So if you are a Hawaii State resident and you are interested in that Shell loan, again, it is also based on financial need, but if you are interested and you haven't received it, there's also that waiting list here on the forms page. If you find that, say you accidentally accepted something on your MyOH portal for financial aid and you didn't really want that loan or whatever, most of the time it's Parent Plus loans, from what I've seen. We have this financial aid change request form where you can submit it to us to request any kind of changes to your aid, whether you want to reduce a loan, increase a loan, cancel something, or even just notify us of some outside scholarships that you're receiving. You can do that easily here with this financial aid change request form. When you click on it, it's going to prompt you to log in to your Hawaii.edu account if you're not already logged in on that browser. So you have to do that, and then you'll just simply fill out an easy form. Go ahead and do that. I also had mentioned if you were going to be enrolled less than full-time, you got to let us know. There's another form for that. Enrollment form right here. This 2022-2023 enrollment form. This is where you'll go to, I guess it's another login. So you'll want to go there to do the form. And then you'll, I guess, declare to our office like what amount of credits you're going to be enrolled in for the semester, so we know. And then we'll be able to adjust your aid accordingly and get any funding dispersed out that hasn't already. So the financial aid, I know the big question at the beginning of every semester is when's the money coming in? If you've been monitoring your MyUH services account and everything and seeing those transactions, you should have started seeing funding start paying through on the 12th. So last week, was it Friday? Yeah, last Friday is when funding started coming in. So that's what's happening right now. Cashier's office is working on paying all of those funds to your balances and everything. But if you haven't started seeing the funding coming through, then there might be something, whether you're enrolled below full-time or if there's some kind of outstanding requirement going on. But right now, cashier's office is working hard to get everything through, and they'll be sending out refunds soon, we expect, for those of you who have more funding than charges. If you have more charges than funding, then you'll be able to check your MyUH services account to see the remaining balance that's going to be due. And I believe tomorrow is a big payment deadline, so hopefully you guys have everything squared away. I guess, do you folks have any financial aid questions? Or, oh, sure. So the question was if there's more funding than the charges and then the refund's going to come through, if it can be used to, I guess, sort of like pay back a loan or reduce the loan amount so that it kind of balances out. That's right, right? Yeah, so you can do that. You have, I guess, up to about 2 weeks after the funds are dispersed to kind of decide that you want to send some of it back. So you can do that change request form. What happens though is that the cashier's office might process your refund already and have the funds getting to you like through a paper check. They have it in the mail. Then if you reduce the financial aid, like say a Parent Plus loan or unsubsidized loan. So you can reduce that, and then what will happen is that you'll have an outstanding balance. Then once you get that refund check, you can bring it back to our cashier's office or deposit to your bank account and pay it electronically back to the school. Yeah. So it's a little complicated. Well, not complicated, but there's a few steps involved. Yeah, but yeah, you can notify our office with that change request form if you do want to reduce any of the loans because you're receiving that refund, and do it as soon as possible.
Okay, so we were doing the loans back out of high school, this paid for a majority of my tuition, and we just got the change form in 2 days ago. I haven't heard anything back on it. It takes tomorrow. Is that all right? Like, am I gonna start panicking or like calling them to ask for an extension to the due date or something?
Okay, so there was a question about, I guess if you still have an outstanding balance and the due date's coming up, the payment deadline tomorrow. For students who are receiving financial aid, our cashier's office knows who you are, so they know that things are still in the works a lot of times. So they usually hold off on that due date for students who receive aid or scholarships. So from what I've been told, they're not going to be disenrolling anyone from courses at this point for not having that balance paid down yet. But what may happen is eventually a hold might be placed on your account until the balance is paid. So you can't like change your registration or do other things that involve like a fully validated student ID. Yeah, but you're supposed to be able to keep the classes. Yeah. Back there.
Yes. Does that also validate with the GI Bill?
Yeah, so GI Bill, that I'm not too familiar with because it's handled by our VA liaison in the records office or the registrar's office. But I believe as long as you've started the process, then the registrar's office should have let the cashier's office know we're expecting the funding. Because, yeah, I know that for the VA programs, a lot of times the funding kind of takes a while to come in. Yeah,
Okay.
it's nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah. Yep.
So I received an email saying requirements for you to have the financial aid, saying how you have to have 12 credits or more to be full-time. If I'm receiving that email, does that mean that my financial aid is already in? I just have to just keep with the requirements?
If you're receiving that email, then that should mean that we've, I guess, processed an award offer for you. That's just kind of one of those notifications that's supposed to go out to everybody, just kind of letting you know of the requirements.
So just to accept it, just go to the UH?
Yeah, go into your My UH services account and follow the complicated step-by-step instructions we got here. So, yeah. There's a lot of different steps involved in accepting your financial aid. Oh yeah, and when you are accepting your financial aid, if this looks familiar to you folks, I always like to remind everyone who hasn't done it yet, when you're accepting your financial aid and you want to decline some of it and accept some of it, make sure you click the button that says Submit Decision, because there's another button right next to it that says Accept Full Amount of All Awards. So if you accidentally hit that one, it's going to accept everything, even if you mark it as decline. Then you'll have to contact our office with that change form and ask us to cancel out the ones you really don't want.
One more question. In my Start GPS, I have a class that says not in plan. And, but for some reason, when it comes to my major being in engineering, I'm required to do that class.
Okay.
Will that affect any of my financial aid?
Yeah, so if you just leave it like that and STAR still says that it's not in plan, then it's not going to show as eligible for federal aid. So you're going to want to contact your academic advisor because they're able to get that fixed. We're not able to do it on our end, so we need them to do it since they're the ones who are, I guess, experts with your program requirements. Yeah, so if you folks do have any classes that you're taking that STAR says not in plan, contact your academic advisor to make sure that they can get it in plan if it truly is.
Thank you.
Yeah. that's part of that course program of study thing that we have required of us. So that's where that comes into play. Yeah, but do you folks have other? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is if you're expecting some scholarships to still come in, how do you notify us? So that's another thing you can do with that change request form. Yeah, so with that change request form, you'll be able to say that you have like an outside resource, like a scholarship. You'll be able to list like who the donor is, then the amount and which term it's for. And then when we receive it, we'll put it into our system as funding that we're expecting. And then that's when the cashiers will be aware of it to know that you're still waiting on funding to come in. Yeah, here it is. Yep, so it's all accessible through this manoa.hawaii.edu/FAS page, the form section right there. But folks have other financial aid questions? Right now, I think our queue for the Zoom sessions are kind of full right now. Let's see where we're at. Okay, so if you click that. Yeah, oh, and it's a 2-hour estimated wait right now.